Chesterfield, it's more fun at Watermark. Big screens, big funds make you feel so good. It's more fun at Watermark. It's more than just a movie, it's a big day out. Gotta go to the show where the good times are. It's more fun at Watermark. It's more fun at Watermark.
Welcome to Watermark, your hometown church for great community and fellowship. Help keep the sanctuary clean by depositing litter in trash receptacles. And be sure to use the Church Center app or visit Guest Central to sign up for anything we have going on or purchase merch. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
It's more than just a movie, it's a big day out. Gotta go to the show where the good times are. It's more fun at Watermark. It's more fun at Watermark.
So I'm an introvert, and at the movie theater, when everybody does the clap, I never clap. I clap for you this morning, but I never do it at the movie theater because I just don't want anybody to even notice I'm there. But anyways, hey, so all this stuff, all the decorations, all that kind of stuff, I spent a lot of time this week. This is all me. I made it all. Just kidding. I didn't do anything. But Courtney Jerome, Derek's wife, and her mom, Sue, they did a lot of the heavy lifting, the creativity, all the design, all that kind of stuff, putting it together. They did an amazing job. Would you just give them a round of applause? So just looks amazing, and every year, always a new theme, and it's cool stuff. So I'll start off with this. I don't know if you know this, but I love the church. I love the local church, and I'm sure that me saying that doesn't necessarily surprise you, but I will say that it should. It should surprise you that I love the local church, and the reason why it should surprise you is because I'm a pastor's kid. And as a pastor's kid, we get to see the best of the church, but we also get to see the other side. We get to see some of the worst stuff that happens within the church. And to me, any pastor's kid that grows up and still loves the church, I think it's proof that God is still moving, because as a pastor's kid, we have this unique perspective that we get to see everything happening. And when we're there at church, I mean, because I grew up, we were there all the time, right? Anytime the church doors were open, we were there at church. And I remember, right, some of the stuff that I, vividly remember. I remember growing up, I'd hear people, they'd walk out on a Sunday morning and they'd say to my dad, "Oh, that message was so good." And I'd be like, "No, it was boring, Dad. No, it wasn't that good." And then I remember on Sundays, my dad would tell stories about us as kids, my brother and my sister and I, and then people come up after church and they'd be like, "Oh, they'd kind of like interact with us," and it was so embarrassing. I hated it. But now I do love being on the other side of that. When I can tell stories about my kids, it feels good. But I remember even people would, they'd, on a Sunday morning, they say, "Oh, it was such a good service this morning, and the Spirit of God was moving." And I'd be like, "No, the room was full. That's what you felt. Take that same number of people and put them in a room 4 times as big. It would feel really empty." And I know that sounds a little cynical of me, but as a pastor's kid, it's very easy to have some of that, because as a pastor's kid, you see the best and you see the worst. Now, my mom and dad, they did a really good job of shielding us kids from all the negative stuff. Anything that might have happened as we were growing up, I didn't really see much of that. We were able to kind of grow up and see mostly the good side of church. Now, I know there was still stuff that went on, but my parents just somehow protected us from all of that stuff. But I remember it very specifically. Probably one of the main things that sticks out in my mind, and the reason I can, this had a big impact on me. I still remember these people's names. There was a couple that attended our church, Mark and Angie Boomer. And we're talking, this was 35 years ago. And Mark and Angie Boomer, and they were younger, and I kind of looked up to them, just like as a couple, as people. I really liked them. And I don't even know why, but all of a sudden they weren't at our church anymore. They just stopped attending our church. And I remember at some point saying, "Hey, where did Mark and Angie go?" And my dad said, "Well, they left." They didn't like things. They quit going to our church. They said that they weren't getting fed here. They didn't like me, didn't like my messages. So they just up and left. And again, my dad shielded us from a lot, but I took that personally. Like, I was like, no, that's my dad. He's good at what he does and all that kind of stuff. And I remember just feeling kind of hurt by some of that. And again, my parents did a great job of protecting us. But I remember people that didn't like to worship. When I was growing up in that season of the church, there was a big transition from hymns to kind of some of the choruses, songs that we sing now. And there were people in our church that they just stopped coming because they didn't like, the new songs. Or there were some people that hated the song so much but liked the church, they'd wait outside and then come in just for the message. That they said, I don't like those songs. I'll just come in for the message. And that's how they were. And so as a pastor's kid, you get to see some really good stuff and God move in some really powerful ways, but you also get to sometimes just see some of the bad stuff. And to me, the fact that I am still sane and love the church, I think it's kind of amazing. And when I look back at my childhood and those teenage years, I think this, I wonder where I'd be without the church. I really do. I wonder where my life would be, where I'd be right now without the church's influence in my life in those early years, because much of who I am was shaped by growing up in the church. Because if you have that experience, what I experienced, I was surrounded by people that loved Jesus and loved me, and people that loved the church too. And so I can't imagine where my life would be without that influence as I was growing up. That I know that I was saved from some, dumb decisions along the way because I had some people around me helping my parents kind of guide me in the right direction. And so the church had a huge impact on my life. People invested in me when I was a teenager and I trying to figure out life. People came around me and helped me as I was a young adult trying to pretend like I had it all together. And I'm sure without that influence and without that example of people around me, man, I'm sure in some way I'd probably be a mess. And so because I grew up in the church, man, I learned some great things. The church taught me so much. The church taught me right from wrong. Right? I grew up and learned right from wrong by the people that were around me, by the messages I heard on Sunday. My dad preached super practical stuff that you can live this out kind of stuff. And the student ministry that we were part of, there was a lot of games and a lot of pizza, but they also did the same thing. They taught life-shaping stuff to me and all the other students that went through that program. And to the point that I know I dodged a lot of moral landmines because of the church's voice and the church's influence in my life. I mean, just think about this. One of the things that I grew up knowing is I was taught that everyone matters. That everyone is made in the image of God, that I should love people, even the people that drive me crazy. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was even learning how to date, right? Growing up in the church and growing and being a part of the youth group, I learned how to treat women, how to think about relationships and all those things. And here I am on the other side of that as a parent, and I see how important that was for me and how I want my kids to learn some of those same things. The church taught me that I was created on purpose for a purpose. And I'm not the purpose. That truth, it shaped the direction of my life. I learned to ask, at a very young age, God, show me your plan for my life. Not just, hey, God, let me convince you what your plan should be. The church even gave me a glimpse into what God was doing all over the world. My senior year of high school, I had an incredible opportunity. It was not long after the Communist Party fell in what was formerly the USSR. Our church, the Church of the Nazarene, was already doing mission work there and started planning churches sending missionaries to Moscow. And so at 18 years old, very early on, after all that happened there in Russia, in Moscow, I got to go on a mission trip. And I got to spend a week with, some Christians that were, former part of that communist party. I get to spend a week there in Moscow. We were building a kind of a ministry center, and I got to hang out with all these Christians that were there, living there. Even Sunday morning, just an incredible experience for me. We got to worship together there in Moscow. It was called Moscow First Church of the Nazarene. We got to go and be a part of their worship service, and they didn't have lights. They didn't have words on screens. They didn't have anything. It was just a simple room. Maybe they had a piano, but they were worshiping, and I didn't understand any of the words that they were singing. I mean, I know "niet" and I know "spasibo," which is no and thank you, and that's the extent of my Russian. And I had no idea what they were singing, but you know what I did know? I knew that they were worshiping their Heavenly Father. That was obvious what was happening in that room, that they were worshiping God. And it was just an incredible spirit being there and experiencing all that as a selfish, teenager, seeing what God was doing all over the world. I mean, it was just an incredible experience. And I got to experience that because of the church. The church also taught me very early on how to be generous. Now, I don't know if you experienced this when you were growing up, but in my church, we had the little envelopes on the back of all the little pews. They had these little things, and they had these little tiny pencils, and they had these envelopes for the offering. They were all sitting back there. So I remember as a kid, I'd take those and I'd write names on them, and then put like $1 million, and then I'd put it in the offering plate. Oh, and I just had this fun thought in my head of like the ushers back there, they're counting it. They're like, oh, Seymour Butts gave $1 million, right? I did it all the time. And I always, Dad, it was me. I did it all along, if you're watching that. But I remember doing funny things like that. But the church taught me how to be generous at a very early age. I remember giving 10% when I was a kid. And because of that, it's something I took into adulthood. And certainly not because I'm a great person or not because I'm naturally generous, but the church taught me the habit of generosity. And so the church for me, taught me so much, and that's my story, and I know many of you maybe have some similar stories, but the church taught me that following Jesus, that's a better way of life. Like, I love the church. I'm a better person because I follow Jesus, and the church taught me all that. The church, for me, has been so good for me. But what's really important is the church isn't just good for me, and the church isn't just good for you, and the church isn't just good for us. But the church, what's really important is the church is good for this community. The church is really good for the world. In fact, the church, why this is so important, the church is actually God's agent of transformation in the world. And this is why God created the church. This is why Jesus launched the church. The church is meant to be God's agent of transformation. And when we get it right, and we're following Jesus and we're living out our faith and we're doing it together and living out in the community around us, man, that's when the church, it can be so good. That's when we're doing exactly what Jesus called us to do. If you've been around for Watermark for a while, you already know this, but we've worked really hard as a church to keep ourselves outward facing, to be, community minded, focused on the needs and the people around us. We've worked really hard to do that as a church because it's important, because it's what we've been called to do. If you haven't met Darlene, she's our community impact director. And so she's in charge of all the things that happen outside the walls of this church, McConn's Elementary, the backpack program, all those things. She leads those areas. And it's interesting, she's been kind of putting together a cohort of other church staff that have the same role. And so she's contacted a few people, in the Midwest area that, are in charge of that community aspect of their churches. And some of these churches are churches that run 2,000-3,000 people. They can't believe the amount of stuff that you do for our community. They're blown away. They can't believe that we're even in the schools like we are. They tell Darlene all the time, like, how are you able to do that? And it's just because we've been, for years now, an outward-facing church, focusing on our community. And God has blessed it, and God has opened some incredible doors. And for us to continue to do that, to be outward-facing, to be intentional about that, that's not easy. Because the natural pull for any church, if we're not careful, is inward. The natural pull for any church is towards itself, towards comfort, toward what's familiar, towards things we like, towards the people that are already here. And it's the same pull that you and I feel in our own lives, right? We have a tendency to focus on ourselves instead of others, but that's not who any of us are called to be as followers of Jesus Christ. And so our church has got to stay on mission. And we've got to continue to keep the message out there. And the mission is what Jesus gave us, right? He told us to go and make disciples, to invite people to follow him. And the message that he gave us to tell others about, the message, you already know this, that God so loved our world that he moved in our direction. And so that's the heart of Christianity. And that's the heart of the church. That's the heart of our church. And if you're like me, maybe if you love the country that we live in, I really think the best thing for our nation, for our country, is a healthy, vibrant, outward-facing church. Because that's what changes hearts, and that's what brings hope. That's what brings light into some of the darkest places. And I know that might sound like a big statement, but I want you to think about it. The truth is the health of our nation really does reflect the health and the influence of the church within it. And so I don't say that lightly. I say it because the message of Jesus, the message of the church, has been the strongest voice for valuing every human being. It's been the strongest, the message of Jesus and the message of the church has been the strongest voice for the dignity of every human being. Now, I know we think things like human rights are just common sense. Like, everyone matters, right? But that is not as automatic as you might think. It feels like common sense, but it's actually something that we've been taught. And where did that come from? It came from Jesus. It came from his followers. It was the church that first declared that every person, no matter who they are or what they look like or what they've done, is made in the image of God. It was the church that declared every single person on earth has value, that every single person matters. And not because of anything that they earned, but because of who created them, who made them. And that idea doesn't come from science or biology or naturalism. That idea didn't evolve. No, it was introduced by Jesus and carried forward by the church. I mean, even in a culture where not everyone follows him, his influence is still everywhere. I mean, think about it. Think about this. Things like human rights, civil rights, women's rights, disability rights, animal rights, all those rights that we, hold on to as Americans, those haven't always been things. There was a day in our world where no one cared about those things. Like if you go all the way back to some of the classical philosophers, they considered things like mercy, they considered things like pity to be character defects. It didn't make sense to be compassionate towards other people that couldn't do something in return from you. It didn't make sense to be generous to somebody. Why would you ever be generous to somebody else that maybe they can't do anything back from you? That's a ridiculous way to live. Like there was a day in our world where anybody that would be generous or have compassion or have pity on somebody else, that would be considered ridiculous. And so all these things that we consider good things, we might think they're innate, we might think they're inherent, but that's just part of being a human being. But history, if you look at history says no. That is not the way the world has always been. These things were learned. They are actually part of the long shadow that has been cast by the teaching of Jesus and carried forward by the church. I mean, what is the one thing? The one thing that Jesus commanded his followers to do. He said, love one another as I have loved you. Right? That's the one thing. He says, a new commandment I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. And we talk about that all the time because that's the one thing. And just imagine if everyone that claimed to follow Jesus Christ, imagine if everyone would just do that one thing and work so hard at getting it right. I mean, could you imagine what that would do in our world? Could you imagine what it would look like if everyone started doing that one thing to love your neighbor as you? I mean, it would change everything. And so for me, kind of where I stand, man, I love the local church. I love our church. And certainly, right, we are not perfect. It's never been perfect. The Big C church has never been perfect. But that's what we've been given. And so hear me. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, here's your challenge. And this is a challenge, whether you like it or not, whether you want this challenge or not, whether you've ever thought about this challenge or not. But this is the reality, that God, in our generation, he has given us an opportunity. And as the church, he's given us a responsibility. And that responsibility is this: to steward what he started, to steward what we've been handed in our generation. So the question is for all of us: what are you going to do with that responsibility? And what are you going to do with that opportunity? What am I going to do with it? What are you going to do? What are we going to do with that opportunity to steward the church that we've been given? And here's what's at stake. Well, here's who's at stake. What's at stake is that next generation. Some of the people that you love the most. What's at stake, whether or not we're going to handle this responsibility well, this opportunity, if we're going to steward the church, what's at stake is it's our kids, it's our grandkids, our nieces, our nephews, our neighbors' children. It's the future. That we have been entrusted with something so precious. Something that has the power to shape the lives of some of the people that we love the most for eternity. And because of that, I'm going to ask something of you today. Whether you're here in person or you're joining us online, I'm going to ask you to get involved in a meaningful way. I'm going to ask you to get involved in a meaningful way, whether that means serving or volunteering, or even that means making the choice to be generous here at Watermark. I'm asking you to get involved in a significant way, to make sure that we maximize our leaving a lasting mark in this community. I'm going to say this, and this might make a few of you feel a little uncomfortable, but this is just how it is. Most Christians, and I hate to say it, but most Christians are just content to consume. It's just how it is. Most Christians are just content to consume. That I'm just going to get what I can. Oh, I'm too busy for that. I don't have time for that. My schedule and all this I got going in my life. But I want you to hear this. So often churches can be like those overlooked gas stations, maybe on a long empty road. You hardly even notice it's there until you're running on empty. Right? Then suddenly, that gas station's a lifesaver. You don't care how fancy the gas station is. All you need, you just need the gas. In the same way, people might not pay attention to a church in their community until they're going through a rough patch, or when life gets tough, or when they feel lost. So the church, I absolutely believe this, our church can become that crucial place of comfort and help for people, no matter how visible it was before. And so hear me. Our doors, they are always going to be open. We are always going to be outward facing. We are always going to be here for our community. That is never going to change. But for some of you, it's time to stop just swinging by every now and then. It's time to step in. It's time to engage with your life, with your family, your finances, and say, you know what, I'm going to help. I'm going to do my part to make what's happening here at Watermark as strong as it can possibly be. Because it's just how it is. Here's what happens for a lot of Christians. They show up when it's convenient. They give when there's a big push or maybe some special project. They believe in Jesus, but they don't really follow him. And over the last few years, we've grown a lot. And that's part of why we're expanding. And you might look around and you might think, well, it just looks like they've got plenty of people doing this or doing that. They don't really need me. No, that is not the case. If you are a part of this body, be a part of this body. Be engaged. Be engaged. Here's the challenge. Don't settle for being like most Christians. You know better, and you are better. And so I'm challenging you to live like it. And I'm sure you've heard in the headlines for years now that the church in America is shrinking. Experts say it's fading like the church in Canada, like it is in Europe. But listen, you are the church, right? Not this building. You. And I know you're busy. I know you have a lot on your plate. We all do. But everything that we've built here and everything God has done through Watermark, it has happened through busy people. People that didn't have time, but they made time. And so maybe it's time for you to make some time. To do for this next generation what somebody did for you, or maybe what you wish somebody would have done for you. So it's time. I'm challenging you get intentional, to make a plan for how you're going to support your church. And for those of you, and I know there are many of you in this room this morning, that you have been carrying the load, you've been serving, and you've been giving, and you've been leading. I want to say thank you, because you get it. You know, it's those small deposits over time that really, in the long run, changes lives. And for those who are just kind of floating in and out, taking what you can, you owe that group a huge thank you. But more than that, you owe it to yourself, to your kids, to the people in your life who need what this church has given you. And so as a church, as Watermark, we are going to stay on mission. We are going to continue to make disciples. We are going to continue to reach lost people, teach people how to follow him. That is what we're going to do. We're going to continue to stay on message that God so loved the world that he did something. And the world needs to hear that. We're going to continue that because that's what we've been called to do. But hear me. If you walk out of here and you only show up when life falls apart, I want to promise you this. We will still be here. We will still be here. If you come back with a broken heart or a broken marriage or a kid in crisis, we will absolutely welcome you with open arms. We are never going to say, oh, did you give? Did you volunteer? Did you serve? Did you check that box? That is not who we are, because we are committed to being the hands and feet of Jesus in this community. But if the church has made a difference in your life, then maybe it's time to invest in what God's doing here. Because the church is still God's plan to transform hearts, to transform his community, to transform the world. And you and I, we have this incredible privilege to be a part of it. And at this point, if you're wondering, man, Larry, would you stop being so pushy? I'm done. I'm done. But here's what I want to ask you to do, because this is so important. That if that's you and you've just attended, I want you to know, I love that you're here. I love that you're here. But if you're out in the community and someone says, hey, what church do you go to? And if you say Watermark, it's time. It is time to step outside of just attending. So one thing, Tyler mentioned earlier, right over to my right, as soon as service is over, we have Grow at Watermark. And even if you're still on the fence and not quite sure, we got Chick-fil-A. So that's got to be enough for you this morning. But I would challenge you. That is the best way to take that next step here and get involved. That you would say, you know what? Okay. I'll take the step. I'll do my part. You know, other people have invested in my kids. Other people have invested in my student. Other people have invested in me. They've given to me, and it's time for me to take that step and give back. And so that's one thing that I ask you to do. And then the other thing that I challenge you to do is, you know, next week we really kick all this off. It's Captain America: Brave New World. And I would ask that you invite somebody, that you bring somebody with you. That's the challenge. And here's what I know. And I get the comments every once in a while, I really don't like at the movies. I know there are people out there that don't like when we do at the movies and don't like the decorations and don't like the movie clips. And to you, I would say, okay, it's not for you. All of this is not for you. Because here's what I hope. That there's somebody, right, that they grew up and they experienced that. Maybe they grew up in the Catholic Church and that swingy bell thing that smokes, right, that whatever that thing is. Like maybe that was what their experience was growing up in the Catholic Church. And as soon as they got their confirmation, they were out. I'm done, right? As soon as mom and dad didn't say you have to go anymore, they left the church and never went back. And now they're just kind of drifting through adulthood and they're not sure, what church could be for them, or not even sure how Jesus fits into their lives. Those people are the people that might just be willing to experience something different on a Sunday morning. And so, right, if at the movies isn't for you, that's fine. But there are some people that their view, their idea of church is that stuffy, uptight, up, down, all that kind of stuff. And that is not who we are. That's not who we will ever be. And we do this because there are people that need to know that Jesus Christ loves them. Every Sunday throughout the movies. Do you know what we're going to close with? I'm going to say to people, you know what? There is a God that loves you so much that he sent his son to die on a cross for you. And we're going to invite people to make a decision to follow him. And so if you've got some people in your life that need the difference that Jesus makes in their life, we are committed to making sure that message gets preached every single week. And so it's on you. Will you bring somebody with you? And I'm not doing this just so we have a big number on Sunday. I do not care. What I do care about is the people in your life, the people in my life, the people in this community that have maybe given up on church, maybe you've given up on Jesus, don't think that he has any say or any power in their lives. That's why we do this. And so every Sunday, we're going to go all out, and I just challenge you. If you're already here and involved and you're engaged, bring somebody with you next week. Bring somebody with you on the Sundays. If you're not involved and all you do is attend on a Sunday morning, I'd love to have you stick around for Grow. And so that's it. I'm done. You can breathe. All right? Right? I feel the pressure too. Right? I don't like standing up here and doing messages like this, but I feel it because so many people are driving past our church and live next door to you and live in our community that they need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. And it's on us. It's on us as a church. And so will we be the church that we've been called to be? Will we step up? And my hope is the answer for all of us is yes. So one last thing. So next week at the movies, and some of you've never experienced this, so just to give you a little taste of what happens on a Sunday morning, a little taste of the movies that are coming over the next few weeks, the clips that we're going to use, check this out. That's next week. Kick it off with Captain America, Brave New World. You can clap, I guess, yeah. All right. So that's next week. So just make sure you bring somebody. Don't forget, Grow at Watermark right over here. Do me a favor, just before we go, I just want to pray, so we could just stand together and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we come to you, and God, I get it, right? Maybe today ruffled some feathers, or maybe today made some feel a little bit awkward. God, I get it. But at the end of the day, I know what we're called to as a church. And what's at stake is so important. This next generation and the lives that represents, the people around us, our community, God, they need you. And you've given us this mission, you've given us this message, and I pray as a church that we would never stop heading that direction. That would always be the very thing that drives us to live out our faith. In every situation, every place that you put us, God, I pray that we will continue to be an outward-facing church, and we continue to see people come to know you, God. That's what you've called us to. So, God, we love you. We give you praise. Amen.